I got 2 drinks everywhere I go. Usually a water bottle too. Okay, so when I think back on, starting from where most 22-year-old people are, which is no money, and being able to accumulate the resources that you need to get to the point where you can have some sort of a semblance of a viable business. Let's say we're going to go from let's say we're going to talk about how to go from 0 to $1 million here. When I look back at what it takes to piece together the resources to be able to put yourself in a position to go from like 0 to $1 million in sales type of level, you're going to need people, you're going to need capital, you're going to need tools if you're doing, some sort of manufacturing like I was. And to be able to hit $1 million, you could really do that by yourself. As far as you could be a one-man show and get there. But where the rub really happens is if you don't have a shop, if you don't have equipment, if you just really have the skill set, that is enough, but you have to really use your resources wisely. And so when I look back on what allowed me to go from kind of that nothing to something mark, that 0 to like $1 million in sales mark, a lot of it had to do with the fact that I took a couple years prior to this to work with people to secure this one contract that then I could get POs, purchase orders in hand that I laid on the table at the bank, and I said, all right, here's my work for the coming year. And that's more commitment than they typically get. But and in my case, I didn't have any collateral to, put up, so I had to have something more than just, hey, I need money to, buy all these tools and get this work. Because if you don't have the work, even if you go out and buy the tools, it's always this like horse and cart thing, which comes first. Well, knowing what I know now, you can go out and get all the tools, but if nobody knows about you and you don't have some sort of a reputation already started, you'll be completely bankrupt by the time enough time has elapsed to where you can have gotten enough work to, have even a 40-hour work week for yourself filled. So, slowly working your way into, doing side jobs or, whatever it takes to have enough of a reputation to where you can work with a company and secure actual purchase orders. That is really the key to then being able to pool together the resources that allow you to then, go and buy a welder, buy, a water jet, a laser, a press brake, the stuff that you need to get started. If you're going to do sheet metal fabrication in this day and age, you have to have something to cut like a water jet or a laser. You have to have something to bend, and a box and pan hand brake isn't going to cut it anymore these days. So you got to have some sort of a brake. And you a lot of times will need some hardware tooling. You might need a welder. The welder is a small enough item you can save up for and buy cash. But a laser, a press brake, all this stuff, I mean, it's really easy to exceed $100,000 here buying very low end stuff. And that just enables you to have the basic resources to cut, bend, maybe weld, and ship a job. In my experience, it's always best to have the work lined up, and that is a very difficult thing to do because you're trying to convince somebody to give you work that you can't even complete yet. So just from that standpoint alone, it's very difficult. But if you really put it out into the world and you really market hard, as far as just knocking on doors and having conversations with people and let them know your intentions and let them know what you're trying to do. Eventually, if you do enough of that, you will have something get dropped into your lap, and your brain will recognize, oh, this is my opportunity, this is it. So that's what happened for me is, I was out there since high school, doing side jobs, doing this, doing that, and people were aware that I was a guy that could do the work, and I was definitely trying to get on my own 2 feet and start a business. So you have enough of those conversations, and then, oh, hey, all of a sudden I get a call one day, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, I got this thing that popped up. The guy that currently does it kind of fell on his face, and we need somebody to pick this contract up. So that was literally how I got my shot. So, to be real about it, at that time, I didn't know how to do that kind of welding. I'd never done that kind of welding before, and it was a long road to be able to fulfill the requirements of this contract. But I knew one thing, and one thing only, and that's really the only thing that I needed to know, and that was that I could do it. And I was gonna do whatever it took to make sure that, even though I was like at the very beginning point of even understanding what I had to do to be able to get this done, whatever came in between start and finish, I was gonna figure it out. So, believing in yourself and knowing that you're just going to do whatever it takes, and being willing to actually do whatever it takes, which is where the majority of people don't quite cut it. The willingness to do that is really the key here. So I had an opportunity put in front of me where a company was currently fulfilling a contract, and that company then no longer wished to do the contract, so the customer needed somebody to make those parts. So they called me, and I was like, yes, like this is it. This is my chance. That was going through my head. I'm trying to play it like cool over the phone, like, oh yeah, I think that's something that would be, something I can do for you. But in my head, freaking, this is it. I knew it. So, having the willingness to say, I don't know what it's going to take, but I will figure it out, is really the key thing here. And then you just take one step at a time from there. So they called me, and they're like, hey, I have this opportunity. I said yes. So then what's the next step? So then you get ideally something in writing that, enables you to put your feet on the ground and pursue this opportunity, because there's some sort of a commitment from your customer. So you do that second. So at that point, you may or may not be able to get that. You might have to put yourself out here, but ideally you've got that, and then you work through the steps of getting yourself in a position to be able to do it. So in this case, I was basically borrowing my dad's welder and borrowing his shop space. That got me started, so that way I could basically make one of these assemblies and show them, hey, I can do this, top to bottom, left to right, here we go, it's done, it looks great, you're good to, at that point, once I proved out that I could do one of the assemblies from top to bottom, I could then start with the entire contract. But that's where then for me, I kind of had to start from square one, because it was like, okay, the big thing first is put myself in a position where I can get this contract, and then second is be able to fulfill the actual volume of the contract. So just being able to do, one or two of these to prove that it was a viable, or to prove that I was a viable source for the customer was one thing, because, that was just building, one or two of these as a sample basically. And then after that, now I have to figure out where I'm going to be able to build, hundreds of these over the course of a year. So now I have to figure out where I'm going to get the money for equipment, where I'm going to put the equipment, and how to do it in a timely fashion, because I can't, provide them samples and then take a year off while I get all these other pieces together. All this has got to happen simultaneously. So your job then turns into wearing a bunch of different hats. And so, like, a lot of times in the mornings, you're doing the work. In the evenings or mornings and afternoon during the normal work days, you're doing the work. And then after that, you're working on the business. You're building or fixing up the building that you're going to be in. You're working on, trying to source some equipment, trying to get, funding for equipment, all that stuff. And that's just what starting a business is like. If you don't have any money, you don't have any choice here. You have to wear a bunch of different hats, and that's just what it is. So, all right, so now I've got the samples made, and it's time to go ahead and start making some parts. So where are we going to make the parts? What are we going to make them with? All right, there's three things. There's what are we going to make the parts with as far as equipment? Where are we going to make the parts as far as having a facility to do it in? And three, there is a huge financial burden involved with actually just getting this contract on. And, when you talk about cash flow effect of having any job, you're going to have to buy the materials up front. You're going to have to then take the time to, complete the job. And then you're going to have to wait 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the terms are with your customer, to get paid. And so, long story short, you might be very likely sitting on all the dollars you have invested into this for 120 days before you see any of it back. So there is, how are we gonna build these? With what equipment are we gonna use? Where are we gonna get it from? Where are we gonna build these? What facility are we going to be in? How are we going to go about doing that? And then where is the funding coming to actually fund the projects that are going to be going in and out? So all three of these things basically led me to, okay, I need to figure out some way to get funding to be able to support all these financial burdens that are now upon me, because, I could use my dad's welder to get the samples done. I could use his, home garage to get the samples shipped out. But that wasn't an option for me to continue for the long term. But thanks to Dad for letting me get that far. But on this point, it was like, okay, if this is gonna be a business now, like, it's time to put your big boy pants on. You better go figure this stuff out. So, all right, I had to then get pretty creative here and also work my customer relation skills, because if I'm going to be able to go to a bank as a 22-year-old with no money, the question becomes, how do I get the bank to give me some money for all this? So I had, again, going back to like step 2 here, the commitment for the customer. I had commitment for the customer for a year's worth of these parts. So they gave me what's called purchase orders. They call them POs usually. And that outlines all these things that they're going to be purchasing from you over the next X interval of time, year, however they set it up. So they gave me purchase orders, which I then took to the bank and said, okay, here is my committed business for the next year. And so then the bank knew that despite not having any collateral, as far as like if I fell on my face, the stuff that they would sell to get their money back, they at least knew that I had actual committed work that was being sent my way, and so I was good for at least a year. And so then that was enough for them to, meet as the bank committee and decide, hey, we're going to, take a chance on this guy. I recommend visiting with local banks for this, because that's really a key part of actually having a successful conversation there. Work with a local bank in your town that you can then go to and, explain who you are, what you're trying to do, and why it matters to the community, and how the bank can help. So I presented those documents. I outlaid a business plan in front of them and said, this is how I'm going to make sure that you guys don't lose money by betting on me. And they got together. They said, okay, we are going to bet on you. And so began the adventure of starting JR Metalworks. So really, when it all comes down to it, if you're in my position where you're starting out, where your biggest limitation isn't so much time, it's money, then you need to really, really work with your customers and your bank or whoever is going to be helping you out with this funding, and, try to, if what you're doing is going to be pretty good sized projects, you need to try to work all those relationships harmoniously to get everybody to come together and just be honest where you're at and explain, where you're at and where you need to go so that people can pitch in and understand what you're trying to do and help you. And then it's your job to deliver on, what you've asked for. So really, when you look back at it, that was my biggest limitation. And had I not figured that out, we would not have a company because there would be no funding for it. I would also recommend that when you're starting from zero and you're trying to get off the ground, if you are in a position like I was where you're offered this big thing and you're just, in some ways just naive enough just to say yes because you just don't even know what you're getting into, to some degree, then, do what I do or do what I did and just take it step by step along the way and look to resources that can help you just take the next step. But ideally, going to the point where, or looking back past or previous to the point where I got that contract offer, there was a lot of different little things, little opportunities that came up that I also said yes to that enabled me to, get some of the basic hand tools and, a TIG welder, a mill at that time. Just that can help you make those onesie twosie purchases where you do what they call bootstrapping it, and you make a little money and you invest it back into the business. You make a little money, you invest it back into the business. You make a little money, you invest it back. And so through that process, you can slowly, get yourself to the point where you can have a sustainable business. You don't have to borrow any money. That's something that a lot of people do and that I highly recommend, and that was what I did that got me to the point of I was at least known enough to be considered for a kind of contract like this because I was just, doing little projects out of my dad's garage and, got in touch with the right person ultimately. And I still work with that person to this day. So, don't be afraid when you're getting started out to really just be honest with people of where you're at, and at the same time be bold enough to tell them where you're trying to go, because as long as you then deliver and show people over time that you were serious about that and you weren't just blowing smoke at them, they will appreciate that and they will try to help you. So be honest, work intelligently with the resources that you have, try to obtain customer commitments on the front end so that can help you, be used as a lever to then gain the resources that you need, and just don't quit. That's it. Don't quit. If you never quit, then it's just a matter of time and you'll get there.